Madison Clark pressed her face against the cool glass of the limousine window, watching the sprawling estate come into view through the iron gates. Towering oak trees lined the circular driveway leading to a mansion that looked like something from a movie: white columns, manicured gardens, and fountains that probably cost more than most people's houses. Her younger brother Tyler bounced excitedly in the seat beside her, his Nintendo Switch forgotten in his lap as he stared at their new home. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Is this really where we're going to live? Tyler whispered, his 12-year-old voice filled with wonder. Madison nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. At 17, she was old enough to understand that fairy tales usually came with a price. Their father, James Clark, sat across from them in the luxury vehicle, his weathered hands fidgeting with his phone. The construction calluses on his palms seemed out of place in this pristine environment. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling contractor in Cleveland, working 16-hour days just to keep their small apartment. Now he was married to Victoria Ashworth, one of the wealthiest women in Connecticut. The limousine crunched over the gravel driveway, coming to a stop before the grand entrance. A uniformed butler immediately appeared, opening their door with practiced efficiency. Madison had never seen a real butler before, and she felt underdressed in her Target jeans and thrift store sweater. Tyler clutched his worn backpack, suddenly self-conscious about the duct tape holding one of the straps together. "Welcome to Ashworth Manor," the butler said with a slight British accent. "I'm Charles. Mrs. Ashworth is waiting in the main drawing room." James straightened his tie, the most expensive piece of clothing he owned, and forced a smile. "Come on, kids. Time to meet your new stepmother properly." Madison had only met Victoria once before, at the small courthouse wedding 3 weeks ago. Victoria had been polite but distant, her smile never quite reaching her ice-blue eyes. She'd worn a designer suit that probably cost more than Madison's entire wardrobe and had spent most of the brief ceremony checking her phone for stock updates. The interior of the mansion was even more intimidating than the exterior. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, and original oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floors as Charles led them through hallways wide enough to drive a truck through. Madison noticed security cameras discreetly positioned in every corner and wondered if this was what living in a museum felt like. The drawing room was the size of their entire former apartment. Victoria Ashworth sat rigidly on a cream-colored sofa, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe chignon. She wore a tailored navy suit and pearls, looking like she'd stepped out of a boardroom rather than welcoming family into her home. At 45, she was only 15 years older than Madison, a fact that had made their first meeting particularly awkward. "James, darling," Victoria said, rising gracefully and air-kissing her new husband's cheek. Her gaze swept over Madison and Tyler with the efficiency of a security scanner. "And you must be the children." "This is Madison and Tyler," James said, his voice carrying a nervous edge Madison had never heard before. "Kids, say hello to Victoria." "Thank you for letting us live here," Madison said, extending her hand. Victoria's handshake was brief and cold, like touching marble. Tyler, usually outgoing and friendly, suddenly became shy. "Your house is really big," he mumbled. "Yes, it is," Victoria replied without warmth. "Charles will show you to your rooms. We'll discuss house rules over dinner." As they followed Charles up a sweeping staircase, Madison caught a glimpse of other family members through an open doorway. A young man about her age with perfectly styled dark hair was playing pool in what appeared to be a game room. He looked up as they passed, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disdain. A woman in her early 20s sat nearby, scrolling through her phone with manicured nails that probably cost more than Madison's monthly allowance back in Cleveland. "That would be Master Devon and Miss Brittany," Charles explained quietly. "Mrs. Ashworth's children from her first marriage." Madison's room was larger than her family's old living room, with a 4-poster bed, antique furniture, and windows overlooking the estate's gardens. Tyler's room was next door, equally impressive but decorated with a sports theme that seemed chosen by an interior designer rather than a child. Everything was perfect, sterile, and utterly impersonal. "Dinner is served at 7 sharp," Charles informed them. "Formal attire is expected." After he left, Madison knocked on Tyler's door and found him sitting on the edge of his massive bed, looking lost. "This doesn't feel real," he said softly. "I know," Madison replied, sitting beside him. "But Dad seems happy. That's what matters, right?" That evening, Madison borrowed the one dress she'd brought, a simple black number she'd worn to her high school's academic awards ceremony, and helped Tyler with his only button-down shirt. The dining room could have seated 20 people comfortably, but the 5 of them sat clustered at one end of a table that stretched nearly the length of the room. Victoria sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court, with James to her right looking uncomfortable in his best suit. Devon and Brittany flanked the other side, both dressed in expensive casual wear that somehow looked more formal than Madison's best outfit. Devon kept shooting glances at Madison when he thought she wasn't looking, while Brittany seemed to view her phone as more interesting than the new family members. So, Victoria began, cutting her filet mignon with surgical precision. I think it's important we establish some ground rules for living in this household. James nodded eagerly. Of course, honey. Whatever you think is best. First, there are certain areas of the house that are off limits. My office, the master suite, and the wine cellar are private. Second, all activities must be approved in advance. We maintain a certain standard in this family. Victoria's gaze fixed on Tyler's shirt, which had a small stain from lunch. Third, any friends must be pre-approved and meet our security protocols. Madison felt her father tense beside her. In Cleveland, their apartment had been open to Tyler's friends anytime. Some of his buddies practically lived there, especially the ones whose parents worked multiple jobs. What kind of security protocols? Madison asked carefully. Brittany looked up from her phone for the first time. Background checks, obviously. We can't have just anyone knowing about our assets and security systems. Background checks for 12-year-olds? Madison's voice carried a hint of disbelief. Devon smirked. You'd be surprised what people will do for money. Even kids can be used to gather information about wealthy families. Victoria nodded approvingly at her son. Devon understands these things. He's been raised in this world. The implication was clear. Madison and Tyler had not been. Tyler looked confused and hurt. I just want to play video games with my friends. You'll make new friends here, Victoria said dismissively. Appropriate friends from proper families. James cleared his throat. Maybe we could start with a trial period? Let the kids adjust gradually. James, darling, Victoria's tone was honey. Over steel, I've been managing this household and protecting this family's interests for 20 years. I know what's necessary. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Madison picked at her food, watching the family dynamics play out before her. Devon and Brittany seemed completely comfortable with their mother's authoritarian style, occasionally making comments about school friends or upcoming social events that clearly excluded the newcomers. James appeared increasingly small in his chair, nodding along to conversations about charity galas and country club politics that were foreign to him. After dinner, Victoria announced she had work to do in her office. Devon disappeared to his room, claiming he had homework, though Madison suspected it was more likely video games or social media. Brittany vanished just as quickly, leaving Madison, Tyler, and their father standing awkwardly in the vast foyer. Want to explore the grounds? James suggested, clearly trying to salvage the evening. They walked through gardens that belonged in a magazine, past a tennis court and swimming pool that dwarfed anything at the community center back home. Tyler perked up slightly when they discovered a basketball court, though the pristine condition suggested it was rarely used. This is incredible, Dad, Tyler said, bouncing an imaginary ball. Can we really live here? James ruffled his son's hair, but Madison caught the uncertainty in his eyes. As long as we respect Victoria's rules and show that we belong here. Later that night, Madison lay in her enormous bed staring at the ceiling. Through the walls, she could hear muffled conversation from Tyler's room. He was video chatting with his best friend Marcus back in Cleveland, telling him about the mansion in excited whispers. Down the hall, she could hear Devon's music playing and what sounded like a phone conversation about weekend plans. The next morning brought new challenges. Victoria had left detailed schedules for both children, including tutoring sessions with expensive private instructors. Madison's current grades were apparently unacceptable for an Ashworth family member, despite her 3.8 GPA and honor roll status. Tyler would need etiquette lessons and tennis instruction to bring him up to standard. But I like basketball, Tyler protested at breakfast. Basketball is not an appropriate sport for this family, Victoria replied, not looking up from her tablet where she was reviewing stock reports. Tennis and sailing are more suitable. Madison watched her father's face carefully. In Cleveland, he'd never missed one of Tyler's basketball games, even when he was exhausted from work. Now he just nodded along with Victoria's pronouncements, clearly terrified of rocking the boat in his new marriage. The private tutors arrived promptly at 9. Madison's instructor, Mrs. Pemberton, was a stern woman in her 60s who immediately began critiquing everything from Madison's posture to her vocabulary. Young ladies of quality speak differently, she announced, handing Madison a thick book on proper etiquette. We'll need to address your regional accent as well. Tyler's experience was equally humiliating. His tennis instructor, a former professional player named Richard, spent more time criticizing Tyler's coordination than teaching him actual techniques. By lunch, Tyler was near tears from the constant corrections and comparisons to other young gentlemen I've trained. Maybe this was a mistake, Tyler whispered to Madison as they ate lunch in the kitchen with the staff, having been told the main dining room was reserved for formal meals only. Before Madison could respond, Brittany swept into the kitchen looking for her daily green smoothie. She paused when she saw them eating peanut butter sandwiches, food they'd brought from Cleveland since they didn't know what else to ask for. "Oh God, you're not seriously eating that processed garbage, are you?" Brittany wrinkled her nose. "Cook, please prepare something appropriate for the children. We can't have them looking malnourished at public events." The cook, a kind woman named Elena who'd whispered encouragements to Tyler during his tennis lesson, quickly prepared elaborate sandwiches with organic ingredients and artisanal bread. But the damage was done. Madison could see Tyler shrinking further into himself with each criticism. That afternoon, Victoria announced they would all attend a charity gala the following weekend. "It's important that the family makes a good impression," she explained, looking directly at Madison and Tyler. "I've arranged for appropriate attire to be delivered." The clothes that arrived were beautiful but completely foreign to their style. Madison's dress was a sophisticated cocktail number that made her look older, while Tyler's tuxedo was formal enough for a state dinner. Everything fit perfectly, clearly custom-ordered, but Madison couldn't shake the feeling they were being dressed as props in Victoria's perfect family tableau. "You clean up well," Devin commented, appearing in the doorway as Madison examined herself in the mirror. There was something in his tone she couldn't quite read, surprise, maybe even a hint of admiration. "Thanks," Madison replied carefully. Devin had been largely ignoring them since their arrival, though she'd caught him watching her during meals with an expression she couldn't decipher. The gala was held at the Ashworth Foundation headquarters, a gleaming building in downtown Hartford that bore Victoria's family name. Madison quickly realized this wasn't just any charity event, it was Victoria's show, and she was the undisputed star. Wealthy donors approached her with the reverence usually reserved for royalty, and she accepted their praise with practiced grace. "Victoria does such important work," one elderly woman gushed to James. "The Ashworth Foundation has supported education initiatives for decades. Such a legacy to maintain." Madison found herself studying the foundation's displays with genuine interest. The educational programs were impressive, funding scholarships for underprivileged students and supporting innovative teaching methods in urban schools. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe Victoria's wealth could actually do some good in the world. "Impressive, isn't it?" Devin appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "Mother's built something significant here." "It really is," Madison agreed, accepting the drink. "I had no idea the foundation was this extensive." "Most people just see the money and the lifestyle," Devin continued. "They don't understand the responsibility that comes with it. The pressure to maintain the family reputation and continue the legacy." Madison detected something vulnerable in his voice, a crack in the perfect facade. "Is that what you want to do? Continue the legacy?" Devin's expression became guarded again. "It's what's expected. What about you? Any big plans now that you're part of the family?" Before Madison could answer, Victoria's voice cut across the room. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my new husband, James Clark, and his children, Madison and Tyler." The way she said "his children" made it clear they were a footnote to the main story. The crowd politely applauded, but Madison felt their calculating stares. She could practically hear them wondering what James had that convinced Victoria Ashworth to remarry after 15 years of being a powerful widow. Tyler pressed closer to his father, overwhelmed by the attention. "How wonderful that you're expanding your family, Victoria," one woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you'll mold them into proper young Ashworths in no time." "Of course," Victoria replied smoothly. "Family is everything, isn't it?" But Madison caught the subtext in those words, and she suspected everyone else did too. She and Tyler weren't really family, they were a package deal that came with Victoria's new husband, to be tolerated and shaped into acceptable accessories for public appearances. As the evening wore on, Madison found herself separated from Tyler and her father, swept into conversations with board members and donors who clearly had no real interest in getting to know her. Their questions were polite but probing, clearly designed to assess whether she was worthy of the Ashworth name. Meanwhile, Tyler stuck close to James, looking lost in his oversized tuxedo. The drive home was quiet. Tyler fell asleep against their father's shoulder, exhausted from the evening's performance. Victoria reviewed the evening's success on her phone, occasionally showing James photos that society photographers had taken of the family. "You all did very well tonight," Victoria said as they pulled into the estate. "With some practice, you'll fit right in." Madison wondered if fitting in was really possible, or if they would always be the outsiders playing dress-up in a world that wasn't theirs. As they walked through the grand entrance of Ashworth Manor, she caught a glimpse of herself in one of the ornate mirrors lining the foyer. The girl looking back at her was elegant and polished, but she didn't recognize herself at all that night. As Madison changed out of her expensive dress and back into her comfortable pajamas, she made a decision. Whatever it took, she would find a way to protect Tyler and preserve what was left of their family identity in this strange new world. Victoria Ashworth might control their living situation, but she wouldn't control who they really were underneath all the fancy clothes and forced etiquette. Little did Madison know that her quiet determination would soon be tested in ways she never could have imagined. And that the very foundation of everything she thought she understood about her new family was about to crumble around her. 3 weeks into their new life at Ashworth Manor, Madison discovered that being wealthy didn't automatically make people smart. She sat in the library, supposedly working on her assigned reading about proper social discourse, when she overheard Devin frantically talking on his phone in the adjacent study. "I don't care what it costs, just get someone to write this economics paper for me," he was saying. "The professor already gave me one extension, and mother will kill me if I fail another class." Madison quietly moved closer to the open doorway. Her curiosity piqued. Through the gap, she could see Devin pacing behind an antique desk, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "What do you mean you can't find anyone?" "It's just a simple analysis of supply chain disruptions in global markets." "How hard can it be?" Devin's voice cracked with frustration. "Look, I'll pay double the usual rate. Triple if you have to." Madison almost laughed out loud. She'd written a similar paper for her AP economics class back in Cleveland and had received the highest grade in her school's history. Her teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had encouraged her to submit it to a national high school economics competition, though she'd never followed through due to their family's financial struggles. That evening at dinner, Victoria announced that the family would be hosting a dinner party for several prominent business leaders the following weekend. "It's crucial that we present ourselves as a unified, capable family," she declared, her gaze lingering meaningfully on Madison and Tyler. "Devin will be discussing his economics studies with Mr. Hamilton from Hartford Financial Group. It's an excellent networking opportunity." Devin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Actually, Mother, maybe we should focus on Brittany's art history work instead. Mr. Hamilton might find that more interesting." "Nonsense," Victoria replied sharply. "Your business acumen is exactly what he needs to see. The Hamilton family has been considering a significant investment in our foundation's educational initiatives. Your conversation could influence their decision." Madison watched Devin's face drain of color. She recognized the panic in his eyes, the same expression Tyler got when called on in class without having done his homework. Except Devin was 19 years old and supposed to be studying business at Yale. After dinner, Madison found herself walking through the mansion's endless corridors, thinking about the conversation she'd overheard. She passed Devin's room and heard him on another phone call, this one with someone who apparently couldn't help him either. His voice was getting more desperate with each rejection. The next morning brought another revelation when Brittany burst into the breakfast room in tears. "I can't do this anymore," she wailed, throwing herself dramatically into a chair. "Professor Williams is threatening to fail me if I don't improve my analysis of Renaissance art movements." Victoria looked up from her morning stock reports with irritation. "Brittany, compose yourself. What exactly is the problem?" "The problem is that I don't understand any of it." Brittany sobbed. "I can memorize names and dates, but when he asks me to analyze the cultural significance or economic factors behind artistic patronage, I just freeze up. I'm going to flunk out of Columbia." Madison nearly choked on her orange juice. Brittany was studying art history at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Yet she couldn't grasp concepts that Madison had absorbed during free Saturday visits to the Cleveland Museum of Art. Their old neighborhood might not have had much money, but it had given Madison access to cultural institutions that actually fostered learning rather than just providing resume padding. "Perhaps you need a different tutor," Victoria suggested coolly. "I'll contact the agency for someone more qualified." "I've already been through 3 tutors." Brittany protested. "They all say the same thing, that I need to think more critically and make connections between different concepts. But I don't know how to do that." Madison quietly excused herself from breakfast, her mind racing with possibilities. She spent the morning in the library, researching both Devin's economic struggle and Brittany's art history crisis. By lunch, she had formed a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. That afternoon, she knocked on Devon's door. He answered looking haggard, with papers scattered across his desk and multiple empty coffee cups testament to his all-night struggle. "What do you want?" he asked, not unkindly but clearly stressed beyond his usual social graces. "I want to help you with your economics paper," Madison said simply. Devon stared at her for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. "Right. What would you know about global supply chain analysis?" Madison pulled out her phone and showed him a document she drafted that morning. "Probably more than you think." Devon's eyes widened as he scanned the outline. It was comprehensive, insightful, and exactly what his professor was looking for. "Where did you get this?" "I wrote it." "Well, a preliminary version. I can have the full analysis finished by tomorrow if you want." This is actually good," Devon admitted grudgingly. "But why would you help me? What's in it for you?" Madison considered her answer carefully. "Because despite everything, we're family now. And because I think you're not as bad as you pretend to be." For the first time since she'd arrived at the mansion, Devon's carefully constructed mask slipped. "Completely. You have no idea what it's like," he said quietly. "Everyone expects me to be this brilliant business mind just because I'm an Ashworth. But I'm not smart like that. I can schmooze at parties and look good in a suit, but when it comes to actual analysis and critical thinking..." He gestured helplessly at his desk full of failed attempts. "Intelligence isn't just one thing," Madison replied. "You understand people and social dynamics in ways I never could. That's a different kind of intelligence." Devon looked at her with something approaching respect. "You really think you can help?" "I know I can. But I want something in return." "Of course you do," Devon said, his cynicism returning. "How much money?" "I don't want money. I want you to help Tyler feel more welcome here. Stop making him feel like he doesn't belong." Devon's surprise was genuine. "That's it? That's what you want?" "Tyler's struggling more than he lets on. He needs to feel like at least one person in this family actually wants him here." After a moment's consideration, Devon nodded. "Deal. But if you're scamming me and this paper is garbage, I'll make sure you regret it." Madison spent that evening and the following morning crafting an economics analysis that would have impressed her old teacher. She wove together supply chain theory, geopolitical factors, and market psychology in a way that was both academically rigorous and accessible. When she handed the finished product to Devon, she saw his expression shift from skepticism to amazement. "This is graduate-level work," he breathed. "How did you learn to write like this?" "Public library, mostly. And paying attention in class instead of checking my phone." Devon had the grace to look embarrassed. "Point taken." 2 days later, Devon returned from his economics class with news that his professor had not only given him an A on the paper but had asked if he'd be interested in submitting it to an undergraduate research journal. For the first time since Madison had met him, Devon looked genuinely happy rather than just satisfied. True to his word, Devon made an effort with Tyler. He started including him in conversations at dinner, asked about his interests, and even offered to teach him some basic tennis skills to supplement his torturous lessons with Richard. Tyler blossomed under the attention, his natural cheerfulness returning for the first time since they'd moved to Connecticut. Emboldened by her success with Devon, Madison decided to approach Brittany about her art history struggles. She found her in the sunroom, surrounded by textbooks and looking miserable. "Go away," Brittany said without looking up. "I'm busy failing at understanding why rich people in the 1400s liked to commission paintings of themselves looking constipated." Madison couldn't help but smile. Maybe because they were trying to look serious and important for posterity? "See, that's the kind of insight Professor Williams wants, but I can never think of things like that during class discussions," Brittany complained. "What if I told you that you're actually closer to understanding it than you think?" Brittany finally looked up, her mascara slightly smudged from frustrated tears. "What do you mean?" Madison sat down across from her. "You just made a connection between artistic representation and social psychology. You identified that the subjects were trying to project authority and status through their portraits. That's exactly the kind of analysis your professor wants." "But I was just making a joke." Humor often reveals truth. The fact that you can see the absurdity in those portraits means you understand something fundamental about the disconnect between how people wanted to be seen versus how they actually looked. For the next hour, Madison walked Brittany through her art history homework, helping her see that she already had insights, she just needed to learn how to express them academically. Madison showed her how to structure her thoughts, support her observations with historical context, and connect artistic movements to broader cultural shifts. "You're actually really good at this," Brittany said with surprise. "Why aren't you in college? You're way smarter than most of my classmates." Madison's smile faded slightly. College requires money. Something my family didn't have much of. Brittany looked genuinely stricken. I never thought about that. I mean, I knew you weren't wealthy before, but I didn't realize. She trailed off, apparently grappling with the concept that intelligence and opportunity weren't always connected. The dinner party arrived faster than Madison had anticipated. The mansion was transformed into an even more impressive display of wealth and sophistication, with floral arrangements that cost more than her family's former monthly rent and enough catered food to feed a small village. Madison wore another designer dress that had appeared in her closet, this one a deep blue that brought out her eyes and made her look older and more sophisticated. The guests were exactly what Madison had expected: wealthy, powerful, and used to being the smartest people in any room. Mr. Hamilton from Hartford Financial Group was a silver-haired man in his 60s who commanded attention simply by standing still. His wife was a former museum curator who spoke about art with the authority of someone who had spent decades studying it. During cocktails, Madison watched Devon work the room with newfound confidence. His economics discussion with Mr. Hamilton was going well, so well that other guests began joining their conversation, drawn by Devon's surprisingly insightful analysis of current market trends. Madison felt a warm satisfaction watching him succeed, knowing she had played a part in his transformation. Brittany was holding her own with Mrs. Hamilton, discussing the cultural significance of Medici patronage with an enthusiasm and depth of understanding that surprised everyone, including herself. When Mrs. Hamilton complimented her insights and asked which art history program she was attending, Brittany beamed with pride. "Your children are quite impressive," Mr. Hamilton commented to Victoria during dinner. "Devon's grasp of economic theory is sophisticated, and Brittany clearly has a genuine passion for art history. You must be very proud. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel." Now, back to where we left off. Victoria graciously accepted the praise, though Madison noticed her quick glance toward her stepchildren. For the first time, Madison and Tyler weren't being treated as burdens to be hidden or tolerated, they were simply part of the family tableau, neither highlighted nor dismissed. After dinner, as the guests moved to the library for brandy and cigars, Mr. Hamilton approached Madison directly. "I understand you're James's daughter. What are your academic interests?" Madison felt every eye in the room turn toward her. This was the moment she'd been dreading, when her lack of prestigious credentials would be exposed in front of Victoria's influential friends. But instead of panic, she felt a calm confidence settle over her. "I'm particularly interested in economic policy and its social impacts," she replied. "Especially how educational access affects economic mobility in underserved communities." Mr. Hamilton's eyebrows rose with interest. "That's quite specific. Have you done any research in that area?" "Some," Madison said modestly. "Though I'm more interested in practical applications than theoretical frameworks." What followed was a 15-minute conversation that left several wealthy guests looking impressed and Mr. Hamilton looking genuinely intrigued. Madison found herself discussing economic theory with the same ease she'd used to help Devon with his paper, but this time applying it to real-world problems she'd witnessed firsthand in Cleveland. "You know," Mr. Hamilton said as the evening wound down, "Hartford Financial has an internship program for promising students. If you're interested in pursuing economics formally, I'd be happy to discuss opportunities." Victoria's smile became noticeably strained. "How generous of you, David. Though Madison is still quite young and has much to learn about our world." "Intelligence doesn't wait for age," Mr. Hamilton replied mildly. "Some of our most successful analysts started young." He handed Madison his business card. "Think about it." As the guests departed and the family retreated to their respective rooms, Madison felt something shift in the house's atmosphere. Devon nodded at her with what looked suspiciously like respect. Brittany actually smiled and said good night. Even Victoria's usual cold dismissal seemed to carry an undercurrent of something Madison couldn't quite identify, perhaps a grudging acknowledgement that her stepdaughter wasn't quite the liability she'd assumed. Later that night, Tyler knocked on Madison's door, bouncing with excitement. "Devon said he's going to take me to a real basketball game next weekend. And Brittany asked if I wanted to see her art books." Madison hugged her little brother, feeling hopeful for the first time since they'd arrived at the mansion. Maybe they could find their place in this strange new world after all. Maybe they could be more than just James Clark's children, tolerated for his sake. But as she drifted off to sleep, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that her evening's success had also painted a target on her back. Victoria Ashworth was accustomed to being the smartest, most capable person in any room, and she definitely wasn't used to being upstaged by a 17-year-old from Cleveland. The game was about to become much more complicated. Victoria's retaliation began subtly, like poison spreading through water. The morning after the dinner party, Madison woke to find her tutoring schedule had been completely restructured. Instead of the manageable 3 hours of daily instruction, she now faced 8 hours of intensive sessions with new instructors who seemed determined to find her inadequacies. Mrs. Ashworth felt your previous curriculum was insufficient, explained Dr. Margaret Whitfield, a severe woman with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun. We'll be covering advanced calculus, molecular biology, constitutional law, and classical literature simultaneously. I trust you can keep up. Madison had excelled in math and science back in Cleveland, but the pace Dr. Whitfield set was deliberately punishing. Complex equations were thrown at her without proper foundation work, and when she struggled with unfamiliar concepts, Dr. Whitfield's disapproval was palpable. Perhaps you're not as academically gifted as some people believe, Dr. Whitfield remarked coldly when Madison couldn't immediately solve a differential equation she'd never encountered before. Natural intelligence only goes so far without proper breeding and early education. Meanwhile, Tyler's own situation deteriorated rapidly. His tennis lessons with Richard became grueling 3-hour sessions that left him exhausted and frustrated. His etiquette instructor, a pinched-faced woman named Miss Thornberry, criticized everything from his posture to his pronunciation with increasing harshness. Young Master Tyler, Miss Thornberry announced during a particularly brutal session, your background is showing. We must work twice as hard to overcome the disadvantages of your upbringing. Tyler came to Madison's room that evening with tears in his eyes. I can't do anything right, he whispered. Miss Thornberry says I walk like a peasant and talk like a street urchin. Richard says I'll never have the natural grace required for proper athletics. Madison felt her protective instincts flare dangerously. They're trying to break you down, Tyler. Don't let them. But what if they're right? What if I really don't belong here? Before Madison could respond, a knock interrupted them. Devin stood in the doorway, his expression troubled. Can I come in? Madison nodded, and Devin closed the door behind him. I heard what Miss Thornberry said to Tyler today. She was way out of line. You were listening? Tyler asked, surprised. The whole house could hear her screaming at you, Devin replied grimly. Look, I know Mother can be intense when she feels threatened. But this isn't normal, even for her. Madison studied Devin's face carefully. Threatened by what? Devin sat down on the edge of Madison's bed, running his hands through his hair. By you, obviously. You made her look foolish at the dinner party. Mr. Hamilton has already called twice asking about your academic background and future plans. Mother's not used to being overshadowed in her own house. I wasn't trying to overshadow anyone, Madison protested. I know that. But Mother doesn't see it that way. She sees a threat to the family hierarchy, and she's responding accordingly. Devin's voice dropped lower. There's something else you should know. She's been making phone calls about you. Background checks, financial investigations, the works. Madison felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of background checks? Everything. Your father's business history, your family's finances, your academic records from Cleveland. She's looking for something she can use against you. Tyler looked confused and frightened. Use against us how? Devin hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to reveal. To convince Dad that you're not good influences on the family reputation. That maybe it would be better if you went to boarding school somewhere far away. The words hit Madison like a physical blow. Victoria wasn't just trying to control them or break them down, she was actively working to remove them from the picture entirely. The next few days brought a series of increasingly aggressive moves. Madison's internet access was restricted to educational purposes only, cutting off her communication with friends back in Cleveland. Tyler's basketball was confiscated because bouncing balls disturbed the household's tranquility. Their father, who had been working longer hours at the construction company he now managed for Victoria's business interests, seemed oblivious to the mounting pressure on his children, but Victoria's most devastating attack came during a family meeting called to discuss household efficiency and future planning. The entire family gathered in the formal living room, with Victoria positioned behind an antique desk like a judge preparing to render verdict. I've been reviewing our household expenses, Victoria began, her tone businesslike and cold. The additional tutoring, clothing, and general maintenance required for James's children has been quite substantial. James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Honey, we discussed this. The kids need time to adjust to their new circumstances. Of course, Victoria replied smoothly. Which is why I've researched several excellent boarding schools that specialize in helping students from diverse backgrounds adapt to higher social standards. She slid glossy brochures across the coffee table. Madison picked one up and felt her heart sink. These weren't just boarding schools, They were Reformation academies, institutions designed to correct behavioral problems and instill proper values in challenging students. These facilities have excellent success rates in preparing students for college admissions, Victoria continued. Madison would benefit from their advanced academic programs, while Tyler could receive the specialized attention he needs to overcome his social difficulties. Social difficulties? James's voice carried a note of anger Madison rarely heard from him. Tyler doesn't have social difficulties. He's a normal 12-year-old boy. James, dear, Victoria's tone became patronizing. I understand your parental attachment, but we must consider what's best for the children's futures. They're currently struggling with the academic and social demands of our lifestyle. These schools could provide them with the tools they need to succeed. Brittany looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Mother, maybe we could just adjust their current tutoring instead of sending them away? Victoria's sharp gaze silenced her daughter immediately. Brittany, you're hardly qualified to make educational recommendations. Your own academic performance has required significant intervention. Madison felt Devon tense beside her. The implication was clear: if the biological Ashworth children questioned Victoria's decisions, they could find themselves under similar scrutiny. I don't want to go to boarding school, Tyler said quietly, his voice barely audible. I want to stay here with Dad. Victoria's expression softened into a mask of false sympathy. I understand this is difficult, Tyler. But sometimes we must make sacrifices for our long-term benefit. These schools will help you become the young man you're meant to be. Madison had heard enough. What if we refuse to go? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria's mask slipped slightly, revealing the steel underneath. Refuse? I'm afraid that's not an option. As your legal guardian during your father's working hours, I have the authority to make educational decisions I deem necessary. You're not our legal guardian, Madison said firmly. You're our father's wife. Actually, Victoria replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, I think you'll find the legal situation is more complex than you realize. James, perhaps you should explain the documents you signed regarding the children's welfare and education. All eyes turned to James, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. It was just paperwork, he said weakly. Victoria needed legal authority to handle emergencies while I'm at work, to make medical decisions if needed, among other things, Victoria added pleasantly. The documents are quite comprehensive in their scope. Madison felt the trap closing around them. Victoria had maneuvered James into signing away parental authority without him fully understanding the implications. Now she could ship them off to boarding school under the guise of providing better educational opportunities, and their father would be powerless to stop her, but Victoria wasn't finished. There's one more matter we need to discuss. I've received some concerning information about your family's financial history in Cleveland. She opened a thick folder and began laying out documents. Madison recognized some of them: old bills, loan applications, credit reports that painted a picture of a family perpetually struggling to make ends meet. It seems there are some irregularities in how certain debts were handled, Victoria continued, her voice carrying false concern. Late payments, defaulted loans, and what appears to be deliberate avoidance of creditors. James's face went pale. Victoria, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, darling. I'm simply sharing information that was provided to me by a private investigator. It appears your previous financial difficulties may have involved some questionable decisions. Madison realized with growing horror that Victoria was building a case against their father's character, creating a narrative that could be used to justify removing his children from his influence entirely. That's not true, Madison said fiercely. Dad worked himself to the bone to support us. If there were late payments, it was because he was choosing between rent and food, not because he was avoiding responsibility. I'm sure there are explanations, Victoria replied condescendingly. But the documentation tells a different story. Combined with the children's ongoing adjustment difficulties and academic challenges, it paints a concerning picture of family stability. The meeting ended with Victoria announcing that she would be making final decisions about the boarding school placements within the week. As the family dispersed, Madison caught Devon's arm in the hallway. How legal are those documents? She mentioned. Madison asked urgently. Devon looked grim. Legal enough. Mother's lawyers are very thorough. If she wants to send you to boarding school, she probably has the legal authority to do it. There has to be something we can do. Maybe, Devon said slowly. But it would require proving that Mother's actions aren't in your best interests. And that's a hard case to make when she's offering expensive private education at elite institutions. That night, Madison lay awake formulating plans. Victoria might have legal authority and financial resources, but she had underestimated her opponent. Madison had spent years navigating systems designed to keep people like her family down. She'd learned to find opportunities in impossible situations. And to fight battles with intelligence rather than resources. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Brittany appeared at Madison's door during the breakfast hour, looking nervous but determined. "I need to talk to you," Brittany said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "About what mother's planning?" Madison invited her in, curious about this development. Brittany had been largely neutral in the family conflicts, neither supporting nor opposing Victoria's increasing hostility. "I heard Mother on the phone last night," Brittany began. She wasn't just talking about boarding school. She was discussing something about Dad's prenuptial agreement and how to modify the family structure. Madison felt ice forming in her stomach. "What kind of modifications?" "I don't know exactly, but she mentioned something about proving Dad's children were a disruptive influence on family stability. She thinks if she can document enough problems, she might be able to renegotiate the terms of her marriage contract." The implication was staggering. Victoria wasn't just trying to remove Madison and Tyler from the house, she was building a case to remove them from their father's life entirely, possibly even challenging his legal custody. "Why are you telling me this?" Madison asked. Brittany looked genuinely distressed. "Because it's wrong. I may not have understood what it was like to struggle financially, but I'm not stupid. I can see that you and Tyler are good people who love Dad. Mother's treating you like enemies when you're just kids trying to adapt to a new life. What do you think we should do?" "I think," Brittany said slowly, "that Mother has gotten so used to controlling everything that she's forgotten other people can be smart too. Maybe it's time someone reminded her." Madison studied her stepsister's face, seeing a determination she'd never noticed before. "Are you sure you want to get involved? Your mother won't be happy if she finds out you're helping us." Brittany's smile was surprisingly fierce. "Let me worry about Mother. You've helped Devin and me more in a few weeks than our expensive tutors managed in years. It's time we return the favor." As Madison watched Brittany leave, she felt a spark of hope for the first time since Victoria's campaign had begun. The battle was far from over, but she was no longer fighting alone. Victoria Ashworth was about to discover that underestimating people was a dangerous mistake, especially when those people had nothing left to lose, the war for their families. Future was about to begin in earnest, and Madison intended to win. Madison's world shattered on a Tuesday morning when she discovered her father wasn't who she thought he was. She'd been searching for financial documents in James's study, hoping to find something that could counter Victoria's accusations about their family's integrity, when she found a manila envelope hidden behind a loose drawer panel. Inside were papers that made no sense at first glance, legal documents bearing different names, birth certificates with information that didn't match what she'd always believed, and photographs of people she'd never seen before, the man she'd called father. Her entire life was listed on these documents as James William Ashworth Clark, not James Clark. Her own birth certificate showed her mother as Elizabeth Ashworth, not Elizabeth Clark as she'd always known. Tyler's documents told a similar story, though his mother was listed as someone else entirely, a woman named Sarah Chen, whose death certificate was dated just 3 years ago. Madison's hands trembled as she studied a photograph tucked into the envelope. It showed a younger James standing beside a woman who looked remarkably like Madison herself, in front of what was unmistakably Ashworth Manor. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "Elizabeth and James, summer 1998, before the exile." The study door opened behind her, and Madison spun around to find Victoria standing in the doorway. But instead of anger at the invasion of privacy, Victoria's expression showed something Madison had never seen before, genuine surprise, followed quickly by what looked almost like fear. "Where did you find those?" Victoria asked quietly, her usual commanding tone replaced by something much more vulnerable. "They were hidden in Dad's desk," Madison replied, her voice barely steady. "Victoria, what is this? What does 'before the exile' mean?" Victoria closed the door behind her and leaned against it, as if needing support. For the first time since Madison had met her, the older woman looked every one of her 45 years. "How much do you understand about what you're looking at?" "I understand that everything I thought I knew about my family is apparently a lie," Madison said, fighting to keep her voice level. "I understand that my father is somehow related to your family, and that my mother was an Ashworth. What I don't understand is why no one ever told me." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying Madison's face with an intensity that was unsettling. "You look exactly like her, you know, Elizabeth. It's been difficult having you in this house." "Tell me what happened," Madison demanded. "All of it." Victoria moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens where Madison had often seen her standing alone in the early morning hours. "Elizabeth was my younger sister. Brilliant, idealistic, and completely unwilling to accept the responsibilities that came with our family's wealth and position. Madison felt the world tilting around her. Your sister? Half-sister, technically. We had the same father but different mothers. Elizabeth was born when I was already 16 and expected to inherit the family business empire. She was supposed to be groomed as my successor, but she had other ideas. Victoria's voice carried a mixture of old pain and frustration. She wanted to use the family fortune for social justice causes, to tear down the very systems that had built our wealth. And my father? James was Elizabeth's security detail initially. Our father hired him to protect her during her rebellious phase. She had a tendency to visit dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help people who didn't necessarily want our kind of help. Victoria's smile was bitter. Of course, they fell in love. A classic story of the rich girl and the working-class hero. Madison sank into a chair, trying to process this information. So James is really my father? Biologically, yes. But the situation was more complicated than a simple romance. Victoria turned back to face Madison. Elizabeth became pregnant with you, which created a succession crisis. Our father was old-fashioned. He believed the Ashworth legacy should pass through bloodlines, and you were the first direct heir of your generation. But you had Devon and Brittany. From my first marriage, yes. But my ex-husband had no claim to Ashworth wealth. Those children were never considered true heirs in my father's eyes. You, however, were Elizabeth's daughter, which made you a potential inheritor of everything. Madison's mind raced through the implications. So what happened? Why don't I remember any of this? Victoria's expression hardened. Elizabeth and James made a choice. They decided to reject the family entirely, to raise you in poverty rather than accept the responsibilities that came with our name. My father was furious. He disinherited Elizabeth completely and forbade any contact with your family. The exile, Madison whispered. Yes. They moved to Cleveland, changed their names, and pretended the Ashworth family didn't exist. Elizabeth wanted you to grow up normal, without the burden of wealth or expectations. Victoria's tone made it clear what she thought of that decision. She died in a car accident when you were 2. You probably don't remember her. Madison did have vague memories, a woman with dark hair who sang lullabies, the smell of vanilla perfume, warm arms holding her during thunderstorms. But she'd always assumed those were dreams or fragments of imagination. What about Tyler? Victoria's expression softened slightly. James remarried a few years later. Sarah was a good woman, a nurse who had no idea about his background. When she died of cancer 3 years ago, James was left alone with 2 children and overwhelming medical debt. That's when he finally swallowed his pride and contacted me. You knew who we were all along, Madison realized. When you married Dad, you knew exactly who I was. Of course I knew. Victoria's mask was completely gone now, replaced by raw honesty. The question was what to do about it. Legally, you have a stronger claim to the Ashworth inheritance than my own children. Elizabeth was never formally removed from succession documents. My father died before he could complete the legal process. Madison felt like she was drowning in revelations. That's why you've been trying to get rid of us. That's why I've been trying to protect my family's future, Victoria corrected. You have no idea what you represent. The Ashworth fortune is worth billions, Madison. Industrial holdings, real estate, investments, the foundation, all of it could potentially pass to you instead of Devon and Brittany. I don't want your money, Madison said fiercely. I never asked for any of this. Want it or not, you're entitled to it. And there are lawyers and distant relatives who would be very interested to know that Elizabeth Ashworth's daughter is alive and has been living in poverty while her inheritance sits untouched. The door burst open suddenly, and Devon appeared with Tyler close behind him. We heard raised voices, Devon said, then stopped short when he saw the documents scattered across the desk. What's going on? Tyler's eyes were wide with confusion and fear. Madison, why is everyone talking like you're someone else? Victoria looked between the 4 young people and seemed to come to some internal decision. Sit down, all of you. It's time everyone understood the complete truth. What followed was the most surreal conversation of Madison's life. Victoria laid out the entire family history, the business empire built by Madison's great-grandfather, the complex inheritance laws that governed family wealth, and the legal battles that had torn the family apart 20 years ago. So Madison is actually our cousin? Brittany asked, having appeared during the explanation. Her voice held wonder rather than resentment. Half-cousin, Victoria clarified. And potentially the legal heir to everything we've built our lives around. Devon was staring at Madison with a mixture of awe and calculation. No wonder you're so smart. You've got the same genes as us, but you were raised to actually work for things instead of expecting them to be handed to you. This is insane, Tyler said, looking overwhelmed. Madison, does this mean we're really rich? It means we're in a very complicated situation, Madison replied carefully. She turned to Victoria. What happens now? Are you still planning to send us away? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she admitted finally. My original plan was to establish that you were unfit to inherit due to your unstable background and lack of proper upbringing. Send you to boarding school? Keep you separated from family business, and eventually have you sign away your rights when you turned 18. But, Devon prompted. But I didn't expect you to be so capable. Or for my own children to respond to you so positively. Victoria looked directly at Madison. You've demonstrated more business acumen in a few weeks than most people develop. In years. You've helped Devon and Brittany excel academically in ways their expensive tutors never managed. And you've shown more genuine concern for this family's well-being than some people who've carried the Ashworth name their entire lives. Madison felt a surge of hope, but she tempered it with caution. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe Elizabeth's exile wasn't the tragedy I always thought it was. Maybe she raised you exactly the way an Ashworth heir should be raised, with intelligence, determination, and an understanding of what it means to earn your place in the world. Tyler looked confused. Does this mean we get to stay? It means, Victoria said slowly, that we need to figure out how to move forward as a real family instead of the complicated mess we've been pretending to be. Brittany spoke up suddenly. What about the legal issues? If Madison has a claim to the inheritance, what does that mean for Devon and me? Victoria's expression became thoughtful. That depends on what Madison wants to do with her knowledge. She could contact lawyers, demand immediate recognition of her rights, and potentially claim a significant portion of the estate. Or, Madison prompted. Or we could work together to ensure the family legacy continues in the strongest possible way. The Ashworth fortune was built to last generations, not to be divided up in legal battles that would destroy everything my ancestors worked to create. Devon leaned forward, his business instincts clearly engaged. What kind of working together? The kind that acknowledges that Madison is family by blood and right, but also recognizes that all four of you have different strengths that could benefit the family interests. Victoria's tone was becoming more confident, as if she was working through a complex problem in real time. Madison has the analytical skills and work ethic. Devon has the social connections and charm. Brittany has developing creative insights and cultural understanding. Tyler is young enough to be shaped into whatever the family needs. Madison felt the weight of generations of expectations settling on her shoulders. And if I don't want to be part of the family business? If I just want to be a normal person? Then you'll be the first Ashworth in 5 generations to walk away from billions of dollars, Victoria replied with a slight smile. Though somehow, I don't think you're the type to run away from challenges. The conversation was interrupted by James's voice calling from downstairs. He'd come home early from work, probably sensing somehow that his carefully constructed new life was about to change forever. Should we tell him we know? Tyler asked nervously. Victoria stood up, smoothing her skirt back into its usual perfect lines. I think your father has been carrying this secret long enough. It's time for complete honesty. As they prepared to go downstairs and confront James with their newfound knowledge, Madison caught Devon's arm. Are you okay with this? Really? Finding out that I might have legal rights to your inheritance? Devon's answer surprised her with its sincerity. Honestly? I'm relieved. I've been terrified my whole life that I wouldn't be smart enough or strong enough to handle the family legacy. But watching you these past few weeks, I think maybe I don't have to carry it all alone anymore. What if we mess everything up? Then, we'll mess it up together, Brittany added, joining their conversation. That's what families do, right? Madison looked around at the 3 people who had started as strangers, become antagonists, and were now offering to be true siblings. Whatever happened next, she realized she was no longer facing it alone. The revelation of her true identity had changed everything, but perhaps not in the way any of them had expected. Instead of tearing the family apart, the truth might actually be the key to building something stronger than what any of them had before. But first, they had to face James and confront 20 years of carefully maintained lies. And Madison suspected that conversation would reveal even more complications than they'd already uncovered. The Ashworth family was about to get much more interesting. The family meeting with James never happened. As they descended the grand staircase together, prepared to confront him with the truth about Madison's identity, Charles appeared in the foyer with an expression of barely controlled panic. Mrs. Ashworth, he said urgently, there are gentlemen here to see you. They say it's regarding urgent legal matters concerning Miss Madison. Victoria's face went pale. What gentlemen? Representatives from Blackstone, Morrison and Associates. They're waiting in the library with documents they claim are of immediate importance to the family. Madison felt ice forming in her stomach. Blackstone, Morrison and Associates was one of the most prestigious law firms in Connecticut, the kind that handled only the wealthiest families and most complex estates. Their arrival couldn't be coincidental. How did they know to come here today? Devon asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Victoria's jaw tightened. Someone has been watching us. Someone who knew exactly when to strike. They found 3 men in expensive suits waiting in the library, their briefcases arranged on the antique table like weapons prepared for battle. The lead attorney, a silver-haired man in his 60s, rose when they entered. Mrs. Ashworth, I'm Robert Blackstone. We represent the estate of Harold Ashworth and have urgent matters to discuss regarding inheritance rights and recent discoveries. Victoria remained standing, her posture rigid with tension. I wasn't aware my father's estate had any unresolved matters. That was the case until yesterday, when we received a very interesting phone call, Blackstone replied smoothly. It seems there are living heirs who were never properly accounted for in the estate proceedings. Madison felt every eye in the room turn toward her. I don't understand. Who would have called you? One of the other attorneys, a younger man with cold eyes, spoke up. We received detailed information about Elizabeth Ashworth's surviving daughter, including documentation proving her identity and legal status. Our caller was quite thorough in providing evidence. What caller? Victoria demanded. Who had access to this information? Blackstone's smile was thin and predatory. I'm afraid attorney-client privilege prevents me from revealing that information. However, I can tell you that our investigation has confirmed the legitimacy of the claims. He opened his briefcase and began laying out documents with practiced efficiency. Madison Clark, born Madison Elizabeth Ashworth, daughter of Elizabeth Marie Ashworth and James William Clark, formerly Ashworth Clark. According to inheritance law and the original Ashworth estate documents, she is entitled to no less than 40% of the total family holdings. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Madison heard Brittany gasp and saw Devon's face go white with shock. 40%? Victoria's voice was barely controlled. That's impossible. Elizabeth was disinherited. Actually, she wasn't. The third attorney interjected, consulting his notes. The disinheritance papers were drawn up but never finalized due to Harold Ashworth's death. Elizabeth remains listed as a primary beneficiary, and her rights passed to her surviving children. Tyler looked confused and frightened. What does this mean for us? Blackstone's attention turned to the 12-year-old with clinical interest. Tyler Clark's situation is more complex, as he's not biologically related to the Ashworth line. However, as the adopted son of an Ashworth heir, he may have certain claims depending on how his sister chooses to structure her inheritance. Madison felt the walls closing in around her. I never asked for any of this. I don't want to take anything from Devon and Brittany. Your personal feelings are irrelevant to legal obligation, Blackstone replied coldly. As Elizabeth Ashworth's heir, you have fiduciary duties to protect and claim your rightful inheritance. Failure to do so could be seen as dereliction of your responsibilities to future generations. Future generations? Madison repeated. Your children, their children, and so forth. The Ashworth Trust was established in perpetuity. You cannot simply walk away from billions of dollars because it's inconvenient. Victoria stepped forward, her maternal instincts finally overriding her shock. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Blackstone? We're proposing nothing. We're informing Miss Ashworth of her rights and obligations. However, we are prepared to handle all legal proceedings to ensure proper transfer of assets and management of inherited properties. The cold calculation in his voice made Madison realize this wasn't about justice or family rights. This was about money, specifically, the enormous fees that would come from managing a multi-billion-dollar inheritance case. And if Madison chooses not to pursue her claim? Devon asked, his business instincts engaged despite his personal shock. She doesn't have that option, the younger attorney replied. Other potential heirs have been notified of the situation. If Miss Ashworth doesn't assert her rights, they will contest the current estate distribution on her behalf. Other heirs? Victoria's voice carried a dangerous edge. Distant relatives, primarily. Cousins, great-aunts, various parties who would benefit from a redistribution of Ashworth assets. Blackstone's smile was purely predatory now. They're quite motivated to ensure Miss Ashworth receives her full inheritance, as it would significantly increase their own potential claims. Madison suddenly understood the trap they were in. Even if she didn't want the inheritance, other people would use her claim to tear apart the family fortune. Her existence had become a weapon that others could wield against the people she was learning to care about. How long do we have? Victoria asked. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next Friday. Miss Ashworth will need legal representation, and all current estate beneficiaries will need to present documentation of their claims. After the lawyers left, the family sat in stunned silence. James had arrived home during the meeting and now, slumped in his chair, looking older than Madison had ever seen him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I thought I'd buried this deep enough that it would never surface. I never wanted you kids to be caught up in family politics and legal battles." "Who could have called them?" Madison asked. "Who else knew about my identity?" Victoria's expression was grim. "It could be anyone. Ex-employees, business rivals, distant family members who've been waiting for an opportunity like this. The Ashworth name attracts a lot of attention, and not all of it is friendly." Devin was pacing now, his analytical mind working through the implications. This isn't just about Madison's inheritance. If the estate gets tied up in legal battles, it could destabilize all our business operations. Stock prices, investor confidence, ongoing projects, everything could be affected. The foundation, Brittany added suddenly. What happens to all the charitable programs if the estate is frozen during litigation? Victoria nodded grimly. Hundreds of scholarships, research grants, and community programs could be suspended. Thousands of people who depend on Ashworth Foundation support would be left without resources. Madison felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. "So if I claim my inheritance, I hurt Devin and Brittany. But if I don't, other people will use my name to destroy everything anyway." "It's worse than that," James said quietly. "The lawyers mentioned that other heirs have been notified. Some of those people have been waiting decades for a chance to challenge the current estate structure. Your existence gives them the opening they need." As if summoned by their conversation, Charles appeared in the doorway again. "Mrs. Ashworth, there are several reporters at the front gate. They're asking about inheritance disputes and the discovery of hidden heirs." Victoria closed her eyes briefly. "It's already public. By tomorrow, this will be front-page news in every financial publication in the country." The next few days brought a media storm that made Madison feel like she was living in a nightmare. Photographers camped outside the estate gates. Financial news programs discussed the Ashworth inheritance crisis with breathless excitement. Social media exploded with speculation about the mysterious heir who had appeared from nowhere to claim billions, but the media attention was nothing compared to the systematic assault that began from other directions. Someone, Madison suspected the same person who had tipped off the lawyers, began leaking private information about their family to gossip websites and tabloid publications. Intimate details of their life in Cleveland appeared online, photographs of their old apartment, interviews with former neighbors who spoke about their financial struggles, even Tyler's elementary school records. The narrative being crafted painted James as a gold digger who had hidden his children's true identity to manipulate Victoria into marriage. "Dad's construction business, built on lies," read one particularly vicious headline, accompanied by photographs of James looking uncomfortable at charity events. Tyler came home from his new private school in tears after classmates confronted him with printed articles about their family. "They're saying we're scam artists," he sobbed to Madison. "They're saying Dad only married Victoria to steal her money." Meanwhile, the legal pressure intensified daily. New attorneys appeared, representing various distant relatives who suddenly discovered passionate interests in Ashworth family genealogy. Each new claim complicated the inheritance structure further, and the preliminary hearing was postponed twice as the legal situation became increasingly complex. Victoria's business associates began distancing themselves from the family board. Meetings became tense affairs where longtime allies questioned her judgment in marrying James without fully investigating his background. The foundation's major donors started asking pointed questions about the stability of their charitable investments. 20 years of building relationships, and it's all falling apart, Victoria confided to Madison during one of their increasingly frequent private conversations. "Some of these people I've known since childhood, and now they're treating me like I'm toxic." The attacks became more personal when someone leaked Madison's academic records from Cleveland, spinning her high achievement as evidence of calculated manipulation rather than genuine intelligence. Op-ed pieces appeared questioning whether her tutoring of Devin and Brittany had been part of a long-term plan to ingratiate herself with the family. "Teen Mastermind's long con, how a Cleveland girl infiltrated America's wealthiest family," screamed one particularly nasty headline. Devin found Madison crying in the library after reading that article. "You know none of that is true, right?" he said, sitting beside her. "Does it matter?" Madison replied bitterly. "Truth doesn't seem to be relevant anymore. Someone is systematically destroying our family's reputation, and I'm the weapon they're using to do it." "Then we fight back," Devin said firmly. "This is our family now, all of us. We don't let outsiders tear us apart. But the assault escalated beyond media manipulation. The family began receiving anonymous threats, letters promising violence. If Madison pursued her inheritance claim, phone calls in the middle of the night with menacing messages, suspicious packages that had to be turned over to police for investigation. Security had to be increased around the estate. Charles coordinated with private security firms to establish round-the-clock protection, but the constant threat of danger cast a shadow over daily life. The worst blow came when Tyler's school recommended he be withdrawn for his own safety after a suspicious individual was caught trying to access student records and asking questions about his schedule. The 12-year-old who had finally begun to feel settled was once again displaced and frightened. "I want to go back to Cleveland," Tyler told Madison one evening. "Maybe if we just disappear, all this will stop." Madison held her little brother close, feeling the weight of decisions she'd never asked to make. "We can't run away, Tyler. These people won't stop just because we're gone. They'll keep using our names to attack Victoria and Devin and Brittany. Then what do we do?" Before Madison could answer, Victoria appeared in the doorway. Her usual perfect composure was cracked, and Madison could see the strain of the past weeks in every line of her face. "We do what Ashworths have always done when threatened," Victoria said quietly. "We stop playing defense and start playing offense." "What do you mean?" Madison asked. Victoria's smile was sharp and dangerous. "I mean it's time to find out exactly who's been orchestrating this attack on our family. And when we do, we're going to destroy them the same way they've been trying to destroy us." "How do we do that?" "By using the one advantage they didn't expect us to have," Victoria replied, her confidence returning. "You, Madison. They see you as a weapon to be used against us, but they're about to discover that weapons can be turned on their wielders." Madison felt a chill of anticipation mixed with fear. The battle for their family's survival was about to enter a new phase, and she was about to discover just how far she was willing to go to protect the people she loved. The game was changing. And Madison intended to win. Victoria's transformation into a strategic general began at dawn the next morning. Madison found her in the library at 5 a.m., surrounded by laptops, legal documents, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment that definitely hadn't been there the night before. "Good, you're awake," Victoria said without looking up from her screens. "We have work to do." Madison approached cautiously, noting the intensity in Victoria's posture. "What kind of work?" "The kind that requires your particular talents." Victoria gestured to a chair beside her. "I've been thinking about what you said during that dinner party, about economic policy and social impacts. You weren't just making conversation, were you? You actually understand how these systems work." "I've read a lot," Madison replied carefully. "But I'm not sure what that has to do with our current situation." Victoria's smile was predatory. "It has everything to do with it. Because our enemies made a critical mistake, they assumed we would react defensively to their attacks. Instead, we're going to use their own tactics against them." She pulled up a complex diagram on one of the laptops. "I've spent the night mapping out everyone who's been involved in the assault on our family. The lawyers, the reporters, the distant relatives making inheritance claims, they're all connected through a web of financial relationships and shared interests." Madison studied the diagram, her analytical mind immediately grasping the patterns Victoria had identified. "They're not acting independently. Someone is coordinating all of this." "Exactly. And I think I know who." Victoria opened another file, revealing financial records and corporate documents. "Have you ever heard of Meridian Holdings?" Madison shook her head. "It's a private equity firm that specializes in hostile takeovers of family-owned businesses. They've been circling Ashworth Industries for years, waiting for any sign of weakness or internal conflict. And our inheritance dispute gives them that weakness? More than that. If they can prove the Ashworth family is unstable and involved in legal scandals, they can make a case to our board of directors that the company needs outside management. They've done it before with other family businesses." Madison felt pieces clicking into place. "So they're not really interested in my inheritance rights. They want to use the chaos to take over the company. Which means," Victoria continued, "that our real enemy isn't some distant cousin looking for money. It's a corporate predator that sees our family crisis as a business opportunity." Devin appeared in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, Mother. About fighting back. I want to help." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Good. Because I'm going to need all three of you for what I have planned." Brittany joined them a few minutes later, followed by James and Tyler. When the entire family was assembled, Victoria began outlining her strategy. "Meridian Holdings thinks they're playing chess while we're playing checkers," she said. "They've underestimated who they're dealing with. Madison isn't just some teenager they can manipulate, she's an Ashworth. And Ashworths don't lose." "What's the plan?" James asked. Victoria's explanation was both brilliant and audacious. Instead of fighting the inheritance claims defensively, they would embrace them, but on their own terms. Madison would publicly accept her rights as an Ashworth heir, but she would use that platform to expose the manipulation behind the legal challenges. We're going to turn the media attention to our advantage, Victoria explained. Instead of hiding from reporters, Madison is going to give them a story that will make them forget all about family scandals. What kind of story? Madison asked nervously. The story of a brilliant young woman who discovered her true identity and chose to use her inheritance to fight corporate greed and protect family businesses from predatory takeovers. Devin leaned forward, his business instincts engaged. You want Madison to become the public face of resistance against hostile takeovers? I want her to become more than that. I want her to become a symbol of what the next generation of business leaders can be: intelligent, ethical, and committed to using wealth responsibly. The plan was complex and would require perfect timing. Madison would need to master not just the legal aspects of her inheritance, but also the broader economic implications of corporate predation. She would have to become an expert on business, law, financial markets, and public relations, all while maintaining the facade of a teenager simply trying to understand her family heritage. Can you do it? Victoria asked directly. Can you become the person this plan requires? Madison thought about Tyler's tears after being bullied at school, about Devin's relief at finally having academic success, about Brittany's growing confidence in her own abilities. She thought about James working 16-hour days to support them, and about Victoria's willingness to risk everything to protect her family. Yes, she said firmly. But I'm going to need help. What followed were the most intensive weeks of Madison's life. Victoria arranged for the best tutors money could buy, not the sadistic instructors who had been hired to break her down, but genuine experts who recognized her potential and pushed her to excel: corporate law, international finance, public speaking, media relations. Madison absorbed it all with the same hunger for knowledge that had made her valedictorian of her Cleveland high school. But this time, the stakes were higher than any grade. Devin became her partner in understanding the technical aspects of business operations. His natural charm and social connections provided insights into how wealthy families actually operated behind their public facades. It's not enough to be smart, he explained during one of their study sessions. You have to understand the psychology of wealth, how people think when they have unlimited resources, what motivates them, what they fear. Brittany contributed her growing expertise in cultural analysis, helping Madison understand how to craft a public image that would resonate with different audiences. The media loves a good underdog story, Brittany said as they practiced interview techniques. But they also love to tear down anyone who gets too successful too quickly. You have to walk a careful line between relatable and impressive. Even Tyler played a role, serving as Madison's reality check when the pressure of preparation threatened to overwhelm her. You're still my sister, he reminded her during a particularly stressful evening. Don't forget that while you're learning to be some kind of business superhero. Meanwhile, Victoria worked behind the scenes to build the infrastructure Madison would need. Legal teams were assembled, not to fight the inheritance claims but to manage them strategically. Public relations specialists were briefed on the narrative they would be promoting. Financial analysts prepared detailed reports on Meridian Holdings' previous acquisitions and their patterns of corporate manipulation. We're not just defending ourselves, Victoria explained to Madison during one of their late-night strategy sessions. We're going on the offensive against a system that preys on family businesses. If we succeed, we'll be protecting more than just our own company. The breakthrough came when Madison discovered a pattern in Meridian's previous takeovers that even Victoria's experts had missed. She was reviewing financial documents at 2 a.m. when she noticed irregularities in timing and stock movements that suggested potential insider trading. They're not just opportunistic, Madison explained to the assembled family the next morning. They're actively creating the crises they then exploit. Look at these patterns: stock prices dropping just before they make their moves, media coverage that seems coordinated, legal challenges that appear simultaneously across multiple targets. Victoria studied Madison's analysis with growing excitement. If you're right, this isn't just aggressive business practice, it's potential securities fraud. More than that, Devin added, understanding the implications. If we can prove they're manipulating markets and orchestrating false crises, we can expose their entire operation. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Madison had identified at least 6 family businesses that had been targeted by Meridian using nearly identical tactics: coordinated legal challenges, orchestrated media campaigns, and mysterious stock movements that benefited Meridian's investment positions. We need more proof, Victoria decided. Something concrete that ties all these cases together. I might be able to help with that, James said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. What? You think I've been sitting around doing nothing while you kids saved the family business? It turned out that James had been conducting his own investigation, using his construction industry connections to research Meridian's business practices. His working-class background had given him access to sources that Victoria's wealthy associates couldn't reach. Construction workers talk to each other, James explained. When Meridian takes over a company, they usually start by selling off real estate and cutting maintenance contracts. I've been talking to guys who lost jobs when family businesses got absorbed by corporate giants. James had compiled a list of former employees from Meridian-acquired companies, many of whom had witnessed questionable practices but had been silenced by non-disclosure agreements and financial pressure. Some of these people are willing to talk, James continued. They're angry about what happened to their companies, and they want to see justice done. Victoria looked at her husband with new respect. James, that's brilliant investigative work. Don't sound so surprised, James replied with a slight smile. I may not have gone to fancy schools, but I know how to dig up information when I need to. The final piece of their strategy involved Madison's public debut as an Ashworth heir, but not in the way their enemies expected. Instead of a defensive press conference about inheritance rights, Madison would hold a symposium on corporate responsibility and family business protection. We're going to invite business journalists, financial analysts, and academics, Victoria explained. Madison will present her research on predatory business practices while simultaneously announcing her commitment to using her inheritance responsibly. Won't that seem obvious? Like we're trying too hard to control the narrative? Brittany asked. That's why Madison's presentation has to be genuinely impressive, Victoria replied. If her analysis is solid and her insights are valuable, the substance will overshadow any perception of manipulation. Madison spent days preparing her presentation, knowing that this single event could determine the future of her family. She would have one chance to shift public perception from seeing her as a disruptive outsider to recognizing her as a legitimate business leader with important things to say. The pressure was enormous, but Madison found herself energized rather than intimidated. For the first time since discovering her true identity, she felt like she had a clear purpose and a plan that could actually work. Are you ready for this? Victoria asked on the evening before the symposium. Madison looked around at her family, Devon reviewing her presentation slides one final time, Brittany practicing potential media questions, Tyler offering encouragement, James coordinating with their security team, and Victoria orchestrating every detail with military precision. I'm ready, Madison said, and meant it. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, Madison felt like they might actually have a chance to win. The morning of the symposium arrived with unexpected drama. As Madison prepared for the most important presentation of her life, Charles burst into the breakfast room with news that changed everything. Mrs. Ashworth, there's been a development. Robert Blackstone from the law firm has been arrested by federal agents. They're saying it's connected to securities fraud and market manipulation. Victoria's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. When did this happen? About an hour ago. The FBI raided their offices at dawn. Apparently, someone provided them with extensive evidence of illegal trading practices tied to corporate takeovers. Madison felt a surge of vindication mixed with nervous energy. Their investigation had been more accurate than they'd dared hope, but this development would completely change the dynamic of her presentation. Does this mean our symposium is off? Devon asked. Absolutely not, Victoria replied firmly. If anything, this makes Madison's presentation more relevant than ever. She predicted this scandal before law enforcement even knew it existed. The Hartford Convention Center was packed beyond capacity when they arrived. What had been planned as an academic symposium on corporate responsibility had transformed into the hottest business event of the year. Financial reporters who'd been covering the Ashworth inheritance story found themselves witnessing something much more significant. Madison stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtains as influential business leaders, financial analysts, and journalists filled every seat. In the front row, she spotted executives from companies that had been targeted by Meridian Holdings, their faces showing a mixture of vindication and anticipation. You've got this, Devon said, adjusting her microphone. Remember, you're not just Madison Clark from Cleveland anymore. You're Madison Ashworth, and you're about to change how people think about corporate responsibility. No pressure, Brittany added with a nervous laugh. Just the financial future of our family and potentially dozens of other businesses riding on the next hour. Tyler hugged her tightly. You're going to be amazing. You always are when people underestimate you. Victoria appeared beside them, her expression serious but confident. Madison, in 5 minutes you're going to walk onto that stage and deliver the most important presentation of your life. But remember, you're not doing this alone. Everything you're about to say is backed by solid research, legal evidence, and the support of a family that believes in you completely. As Madison walked onto the stage, the audience fell silent. She looked out at hundreds of faces, some skeptical, some curious, some openly hostile. These were people who controlled billions of dollars and shaped economic policy. 6 months ago, she'd been a high school student worried about affording college. Now she was about to challenge some of the most powerful people in the financial world. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice clear and confident, my name is Madison Ashworth, and I'm here to tell you about a threat to family businesses that goes far beyond what any of us previously understood. What followed was a masterclass in economic analysis and corporate investigation. Madison laid out the evidence against Meridian Holdings with surgical precision, connecting patterns of market manipulation, coordinated legal attacks, and systematic destruction of family-owned companies. These aren't random business failures or natural market corrections, she explained, displaying complex financial charts that showed clear patterns of manipulation. These are calculated attacks designed to transfer wealth from families to corporate predators who add no value and destroy generations of hard work. The audience was riveted. Madison could see phones being pulled out as reporters live-tweeted her revelations. Financial analysts were taking furious notes, already calculating the implications for their own investment strategies, but Madison wasn't just presenting problems, she was offering solutions. She outlined a comprehensive plan for protecting family businesses through legislative reform, increased regulatory oversight, and industry-wide cooperation to identify and prevent predatory practices. The Ashworth family isn't unique, she continued. We're just one example of how these tactics work. But we're also proof that when families work together and refuse to be intimidated, these predators can be stopped. The moment that would be replayed on financial news programs for months came when Madison addressed her own inheritance situation directly. Some of you are here because you want to know what I'm going to do with my claim to the Ashworth fortune. The answer is simple, I'm going to use it exactly the way wealth should be used. To create opportunity, protect families, and build something better for the next generation. She announced the creation of the Ashworth Family Business Protection Fund, a foundation that would provide legal and financial support to companies under attack by predatory corporations. Devin and Brittany would serve as co-directors, combining their business education with Madison's analytical skills and strategic vision. This isn't about keeping money in one family, Madison explained. It's about keeping family businesses in families. It's about preserving the values and relationships that make companies more than just profit centers. The applause when she finished was thunderous, but Madison knew the real test would come during the question and answer session. The first question came from a reporter who'd been particularly vicious in covering their family scandal. Miss Ashworth, critics say this is all an elaborate public relations stunt to distract from your family's internal conflicts. How do you respond to those who see this foundation as a way to legitimize what amounts to a hostile takeover of your stepfamily's inheritance? Madison's answer silenced every skeptic in the room. That criticism assumes that families are zero-sum competitions, where one person's success requires another's failure. But real families, the kind worth protecting, understand that everyone succeeds together or everyone fails together. My stepbrother Devin has a brilliant mind for business relationships. My stepsister Brittany brings cultural insight and creative thinking that I could never match. My stepmother Victoria has decades of experience managing complex organizations. Why would I want to diminish their contributions when together we can accomplish so much more? She turned to look directly at her family in the front row. The inheritance I'm claiming isn't money or property. It's the responsibility to use Ashworth resources to build something meaningful. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather share that responsibility with than the people who've become my true family. The questions continued for another hour, but Madison handled each one with the same combination of analytical rigor and emotional authenticity. When someone challenged her qualifications to lead a major foundation at 17, she calmly listed her academic achievements and demonstrated her understanding of complex financial systems in real time. When another reporter questioned whether her Cleveland background really qualified her to understand elite business culture, Devin stood up in the audience and provided his own answer. I've been surrounded by elite business culture my entire life, he said. I went to the best schools, had every advantage money could buy, and I learned absolutely nothing about real leadership or genuine intelligence until Madison arrived in our family. If you want to know what qualifies her to lead, ask the professors at Yale who are still talking about the economics paper she helped me write. Ask the art history department at Columbia about the insights she helped Brittany develop. Ask anyone who's actually worked with her instead of just reading gossip columns. Brittany stood next. My mother spent 20 years building the Ashworth Foundation into one of the most respected charitable organizations in the country. In 6 weeks, Madison understood those programs better than I did after growing up with them. She doesn't just want to inherit our foundation, she wants to make it better. Finally, Victoria herself rose to address the audience. I've spent my entire adult life protecting my family's legacy and building our business empire. When James brought his children into our home, I saw them as threats to everything I'd worked to create. I was wrong. Madison and Tyler aren't threats to the Ashworth legacy, they're the future of it. They represent what our family can become when we stop focusing on protecting what we have and start concentrating on what we can build together. The symposium ended with a standing ovation, but the real victory came in the days that followed. Meridian Holdings, already under federal investigation, saw their stock price collapse as investors fled. 3 major pension funds announced they were divesting from companies associated with predatory business practices. Most importantly, 12 family-owned businesses reached out to the newly announced Protection Fund, seeking help defending against hostile takeover attempts. The media narrative shifted completely. Instead of covering scandal and family conflict, business journals ran feature stories about Madison's innovative approach to corporate responsibility. Harvard Business School requested copies of her presentation for their curriculum. The Wall Street Journal published an editorial praising the Ashworth family's commitment to ethical business practices, but the sweetest victory came when Tyler returned to school the following week. Instead of harassment about their families' supposed scandals, he found classmates asking for his autograph and wanting to know if his sister could help with their own family businesses. It's weird being famous for good reasons, Tyler confided to Madison. But I like it better than being famous for bad ones. The legal resolution of Madison's inheritance claim proceeded smoothly once Blackstone's firm was discredited. A new law firm, recommended by several business leaders who'd attended the symposium, helped structure an arrangement that satisfied everyone's interests. Madison formally claimed her inheritance rights, but immediately transferred operational control of most assets to a family trust managed jointly by all 4 children. Devin would oversee traditional business operations, using his social connections and natural charisma to maintain important relationships. Brittany would manage cultural and charitable initiatives, applying her growing expertise in art and social analysis. Madison would lead strategic planning and corporate protection efforts, using her analytical skills to identify and prevent threats. Tyler, still young but already showing promise, would be groomed to eventually take over whichever area interested him most. Victoria remained as the family matriarch and chief advisor, but she no longer carried the burden of leadership alone. James found his role evolving from outsider trying to fit in to respected family elder whose working-class perspective provided valuable balance to his children's elite education. The most satisfying moment came 6 months later, when Madison received a handwritten letter from a small manufacturing company in Ohio that had successfully fought off a hostile takeover attempt using strategies recommended by the Ashworth Protection Fund. "You saved our family business and protected 47 jobs," the letter read. "My grandfather started this company in 1952, and because of your help, my daughter will be able to continue his legacy. Thank you for proving that families can still win against corporate giants." Madison showed the letter to Victoria during one of their weekly strategy meetings. "This is what we're really building, isn't it? Not just wealth or power, but the ability to help families stay together and protect what they've worked to create." Victoria smiled, and for the first time since Madison had known her, the expression reached her eyes completely. Elizabeth would be proud of who you've become. She wanted to use our family's resources to fight injustice and protect people who couldn't protect themselves. You found a way to honor her vision while still preserving everything she walked away from. She didn't walk away from the important things, Madison replied. She just knew that money and power are only valuable if you use them for something meaningful. As the sun set over the Ashworth estate, Madison stood in the garden where she'd once felt so out of place. Tyler was playing basketball on the court. That had finally been properly maintained. Devin was inside video calling with potential partners for a new ethical investment fund. Brittany was in the art studio Victoria had built for her, working on pieces for a gallery showing that would benefit scholarship programs. Victoria and James sat on the terrace, discussing plans for expanding the protection fund to help family farms resist corporate agricultural takeovers. They looked like what they'd become, true partners in both marriage and mission. Madison had gained more than an inheritance. She'd gained a family that understood the difference between having wealth and using it responsibly. She'd proven that intelligence and determination could overcome any amount of money or influence when those resources were used ethically, but most importantly, she'd learned that the best inheritance isn't money or property, it's the knowledge of how to build something meaningful and the family support to make it happen. The girl who'd arrived at Ashworth Manor feeling like an outsider had become the architect of the family's future. And that future looked brighter than anything Victoria's money could have bought on its own. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.